The executioner's blade catches the morning light. Behind palace walls, screams echo through marble corridors where no one dares to listen. This is Istanbul, heart of the Ottoman Empire, where justice wears the face of nightmare. Here, punishment isn't just about death, it's about sending a message written in blood and agony. Impalement, the hook, Bastinado, the sack, the bowstring. 5 methods of torture that turned human bodies into warnings, into monuments of pain that would haunt the empire for centuries. The sultans didn't just execute traitors, they orchestrated symphonies of suffering that would make grown men weep before a single drop of blood was spilled. What you're about to witness isn't fiction. These are the real execution stories that the Ottoman Empire used to maintain its iron grip on power. And the worst part? Some victims took days to die. Number 5, Bastinado. They called it falaka in Turkish, a simple word for an unspeakable horror. Bastinado, the systematic destruction of the human foot, was the Ottoman Empire's most common form of judicial torture. But don't let its frequency fool you. What happened to prisoners during Bastinado sessions would haunt them forever, assuming they survived. The condemned was forced to lie on their back. Guards would bind their ankles together and thread them through a wooden pole. 2 executioners would grip each end, lifting the feet into the air, suspending the victim in a position of complete helplessness. The soles faced upward, exposed, vulnerable, waiting. Then came the rod. Sometimes wood, sometimes bamboo, sometimes a leather whip embedded with metal fragments. The first strike would land with a crack that echoed through the punishment chamber. Pain exploded through the foot like lightning striking bone. But this was just the beginning. The beating continued. 10 strikes, 20, 50, 100. The flesh split open. Blood pooled beneath the prisoner. The small bones in the feet, 26 in each foot, began to fracture one by one, creating a grinding sensation that victims said felt like their feet were being crushed under millstones. The Ottoman authorities used bastinado not just as punishment, but as interrogation. They discovered something terrifying. The human foot contains more nerve endings per square inch than almost any other body part. Destroying the feet meant destroying a person's ability to stand, to walk, to flee, to maintain dignity. Victims who received severe bastinado sessions could never walk properly again. Their feet became twisted, mangled masses of scar tissue and broken bone. Some developed gangrene. Others lost their feet entirely to infection. But the psychological damage cut deeper than any physical wound. The sound alone, that rhythmic crack of wood against flesh, became a form of torture itself. Prisoners would hear it echoing from other chambers and know their turn was coming. They would break before the first blow ever landed. The Ottomans administered bastinado for crimes ranging from petty theft to conspiracy. It was democratic in its cruelty. Peasants and noblemen alike felt the rod. And because it left the victim alive, it served as a walking reminder of Ottoman justice. Every limping step was propaganda. Every grimace of pain was a warning. This was mercy, they said. This was getting off easy. Because what came next on our list would make bastinado look like a kindness. Number 4. The sack. The Bosphorus Strait runs through Istanbul like a dark vein. Its waters have witnessed countless horrors, but few as cruel as what the Ottomans called kese, the sack. This execution method was reserved primarily for women who committed crimes against morality or the state, particularly within the imperial harem. The reason? Ottoman law technically forbade the spilling of female blood in certain executions. So they found a way to kill without cutting. They found a way to make drowning last an eternity. The condemned woman would be brought to the water's edge at night. Guards forced a heavy leather sack over her head, pulling it down over her entire body. They would tie the sack at the neck, at the waist, at the knees. She became a human package, unable to move, unable to see, able only to feel the rough interior of the leather scraping against her skin as she struggled. Some accounts mention weights being added, stones sewn into the sack to ensure she would sink immediately. Others describe the sack being left weightless, allowing the victim to float just beneath the surface, prolonging the agony. Then came the boat. The executioners would row out into the middle of the Bosphorus, where the current runs strongest. The woman inside the sack could hear the oars cutting through water. She could feel the rocking of the boat. She knew what was coming, but the darkness inside the sack made time meaningless. Minutes felt like hours. Hope and terror danced together in her chest. Without warning, she would be lifted and thrown overboard. The shock of cold water, the sudden weightlessness, then the sinking. If weights were attached, she plummeted into darkness, water forcing its way into the sack through every gap. She would thrash and fight, but the leather clung to her like a second skin. The sack became a cocoon of death. Her lungs burned, her throat closed. Panic gave way to a primal animal terror as her body screamed for air that would never come. If no weights were used, the torture was worse. She would bob just beneath the surface, able to feel the proximity of air, but never able to reach it. The current would carry her body away from the execution site, tumbling her through the dark water like forgotten cargo. Some victims were found days later, washed up on distant shores, still sealed inside their leather coffins. The psychological horror of the sack went beyond the drowning itself. It was the isolation, the darkness, the knowledge that you were being erased, dropped into water like waste, your body hidden from sight, your death witnessed by no one. It was execution as erasure. The Ottomans understood that sometimes the cruelest thing wasn't pain, it was being forgotten. But if you think drowning in a sack was horrifying, the next method would make victims beg for the water. Number 3, the bowstring. In the Sultan's palace, certain executions had to be conducted with discretion. When a vizier fell from favor, when a brother threatened the throne, when a military commander plotted treason, these men couldn't be paraded through the streets and butchered publicly. Their deaths had to be quiet, private, almost respectful. This is where the bowstring became the weapon of choice for Ottoman executioners tasked with eliminating the powerful. The method was deceptively simple, a silk cord. Traditionally, executioners used a bowstring made from silk, strong, flexible, and symbolic. The same material that dressed the elite would now choke the life from them. The condemned would be summoned to a private chamber in the palace. Sometimes they knew what awaited them. Other times, they entered thinking they were attending a routine meeting. The executioner, often the chief black eunuch or a specially trained mute executioner, would wait behind a curtain or doorway. The attack came from behind, always from behind. The silk cord would loop around the victim's neck before they could react. The executioner would cross the ends of the cord and pull, twisting, tightening. The victim's hands would fly to their throat, fingers desperately trying to wedge themselves between the cord and flesh. But silk, when pulled tight, becomes thin as wire. It cuts into skin, it crushes the windpipe. The struggle was silent except for the choking, gurgling sounds the victim made. Their legs would kick, heels drumming against marble floors. Eyes would bulge from their sockets as pressure built in the skull. The face would turn purple, then blue, blood vessels bursting in the whites of the eyes, creating a mask of red and purple that looked almost demonic. Consciousness didn't fade quickly. Strangulation by bowstring could take 3 to 5 minutes. Every second was spent in full awareness, feeling the cord cutting deeper, feeling the world narrowing to a single desperate need for air. But here's what made it truly horrifying: the executioner's skill. A trained strangler knew how to apply pressure in waves, tighten until the victim almost loses consciousness, then loosen slightly, allowing a gasping half-breath. then tighten again. This could extend the execution to 10 minutes or more, keeping the victim in that terrible space between life and death, between hope and despair. Some sultans demanded this prolonged method for those who had particularly betrayed their trust. When death finally came, the body would go limp. But the eyes, those bulging, bloodshot eyes, would remain open, frozen in an expression of terror and disbelief. The bowstring left minimal external damage, a thin line around the neck, some bruising. But internally, the carnage was complete. Crushed windpipe, ruptured blood vessels, a broken hyoid bone. The Ottomans preferred this method for palace executions because it maintained an illusion of dignity. The body could be washed, dressed, and displayed as if the person had died naturally in their sleep. But everyone in the palace knew. Everyone understood the meaning of that thin line around the neck. And they understood the message. Even the most powerful weren't safe from the Sultan's justice. Yet as cruel as the bowstring was, it offered something the next method on our list never did: a relatively quick death.
Number 2. The hook.
If you walked through the streets of Istanbul during the height of Ottoman power, you might witness something that would scar your memory forever. A human body, suspended 12 feet in the air, impaled through the ribcage on a massive iron hook. Still alive, still conscious, still screaming. This was the hook, one of the most publicly visible and psychologically devastating execution methods the Ottoman Empire ever deployed. The condemned would be dragged to a public square where a permanent wooden post stood with the hook protruding from its top. The hook itself was a masterpiece of calculated cruelty, curved like a butcher's tool, thick as a man's thumb, with a blunted point that wouldn't kill instantly but would hold flesh and muscle without tearing through completely. The executioner's job required precision. Drive the hook through the wrong part of the body and the victim dies in minutes. Drive it through correctly and they can hang there for days. The executioner would position the victim standing on a platform beside the post. Sometimes the hook entered under the rib cage, between the ribs, carefully avoiding vital organs. Other times it pierced through the shoulder blade and out through the chest. The key was to miss the heart, miss the major arteries, and embed the hook deep enough that the body's weight wouldn't tear it free. When the executioner was satisfied with the placement, the platform would be removed. The full weight of the victim's body would drop onto the hook. The agony was instant and absolute. The hook tore through muscle and scraped against bone. The victim's own weight became the instrument of torture. Every breath caused movement. Every movement meant the hook shifted inside the body, grinding against ribs, tearing new pathways through flesh. Even hanging perfectly still, the pain was beyond description. But the physical suffering was only half the horror. This was public execution as spectacle and warning. The victim hung at eye level with second-story windows. Crowds would gather below. Children would point. Vendors would sell food nearby as if this were entertainment. The message was clear. This is what happens to traitors, to murderers, to those who defy Ottoman authority. The victim became a living billboard of pain, a monument to imperial power. The psychological torture of the hook went beyond the pain. Hanging there, the victim could see their own blood running down the post. They could feel their strength fading. Some lasted hours, some lasted days. The record mentions one criminal who hung on the hook for 3 days before finally dying, his screams weakening to whimpers, then to silence, as his body finally surrendered. Crows would land on the post. Sometimes they would peck at the still living victim. Rain would fall. The sun would bake exposed flesh. And through it all, the victim remained conscious, trapped in a prison of agony, with no escape except death. When death finally came, from blood loss, from organ failure, from sheer exhaustion, the body was often left on the hook for additional days as a warning. It would bloat in the heat. The smell would become unbearable.
But the Ottomans wanted that. They wanted the full cycle of human decay on display. They wanted people to see where defiance led. From living human to rotting corpse, all suspended on a single iron hook for the world to witness. And yet, as horrific as the hook was, as public and degrading and painful as it proved to be, there was one method the Ottomans reserved for their worst traitors. One punishment that made even the hook look merciful. The number one spot on our list belongs to a torture so infamous, so brutally efficient, that its very name still sends chills down spines centuries later. Number 1. Impalement. The word alone carries weight. Impalement. In the Ottoman Empire, this wasn't just execution, it was annihilation. It was the complete destruction of a human being as both warning and art form. Reserved for the worst traitors, for rebels who threatened the empire, for prisoners of war who needed to become examples, impalement represented the pinnacle of Ottoman judicial cruelty. And the Sultan who perfected it, Vlad the Impaler, learned his technique while held hostage in the Ottoman court as a young man. The process began with preparation. A wooden stake, 8 to 12 feet long, was carefully shaped. This wasn't a spear. The end wasn't sharpened to a killing point. Instead, it was rounded and oiled. Why? Because the executioners didn't want the stake to pierce vital organs immediately. They wanted it to push them aside. They wanted the victim to live as long as possible while the stake traveled through their body. The condemned would be stripped naked and forced to lie on their back or stomach, depending on the entry point chosen. Guards would hold down arms and legs. The executioner would position the stake at the rectum or the vagina, entry points that allowed the longest possible path through the body without immediately striking the heart or lungs. Then came the moment that defined true horror. The stake would be pushed slowly, incrementally, forced through muscle and past organs. The victim's screams would start immediately, raw and primal, the sound of a human being experiencing pain beyond the body's capacity to process. But here's where Ottoman impalement reached its most diabolic innovation. The victim wasn't simply left lying on the ground. Once the stake had penetrated deep enough, sometimes emerging from the shoulder, sometimes from the abdomen, sometimes from the chest, the stake would be lifted upright and planted in the ground. The victim's own body weight would cause them to slowly slide further down the stake. Gravity became the executioner. Every passing minute meant deeper penetration. Every hour meant new organs compressed or perforated. The stake would travel upward through the body cavity like a grotesque elevator, pushed by nothing more than the victim's weight. Death didn't come quickly. The Ottoman executioners who mastered this technique could keep a victim alive on the stake for up to 3 days. The body would be positioned so the stake missed the heart and lungs until the very end. Breathing remained possible. Consciousness remained. And the agony remained constant, unrelenting, total. Victims would beg for death. They would promise anything. They would confess to crimes they didn't commit, just for the mercy of a blade across the throat. But mercy wasn't the point. The point was display. The point was terror. Forests of impaled victims would line roads leading to cities. Imagine approaching Istanbul and seeing hundreds of stakes, each bearing a human body in various stages of dying and decay. Some still screaming. Some too weak to make sound. Some already dead but left as monuments. The smell of blood and excrement and death would hit travelers miles before they saw the city walls. This was Ottoman power made manifest. This was justice taken to its absolute extreme. The psychological impact of impalement extended far beyond the victim. Witnesses would never forget. Soldiers would think twice before rebelling. citizens would obey laws they might otherwise break. The mere threat of impalement became a tool of control more powerful than any army. And for those who died on the stakes, their final hours were spent in a hell that no amount of time or distance can make less horrifying. They died slowly, publicly, in agony that turned time into an enemy and made every second feel like an eternity.
5 methods, 5 monuments to human cruelty. The Ottoman Empire understood something dark about power, that fear is the most effective form of control, and nothing creates fear like the systematic, public destruction of the human body. These weren't quick deaths. These weren't merciful ends. These were executions designed to break not just the victim, but everyone who witnessed them, to shatter the very idea of resistance before it could take root. What you've just heard isn't mythology. These methods are documented in Ottoman records, in the journals of European visitors, in the nightmares of those who survived to tell their stories. The bastinado that destroyed feet, the sack that drowned in darkness, the bowstring that strangled in silence, the hook that suspended agony for days, and impalement, the ultimate expression of judicial terror that turned human bodies into warnings carved in flesh and bone. History doesn't just consist of heroes and victories. It's built on suffering we can barely comprehend, on cruelty that reminds us how far human beings can fall when power goes unchecked. These execution stories aren't comfortable. They're not meant to be. They're meant to show us the truth about our past, about the depths of darkness that civilization tried to build itself upon. This is the dark side of human history the world tries to forget. If you want more real execution stories and forbidden history, subscribe to Execution Stories. Because the past has more nightmares to share, and we're just getting started.